My son forbade me from setting foot in the beach house I helped buy. He died 3 months later. The lawyer gave me the keys and the letter that changed everything. I repeat that phrase like someone touching a scar with their finger. The smell of my simple coffee, weak and sweet, filled the narrow kitchen of my Savannah townhouse that morning when everything began to fall apart. The skylight let in a pale light which fell on the worn floor and the wall clock, which stubbornly lost 2 minutes. It was there, beside the bowl of slightly bruised peaches, that my son, Caleb, told me I shouldn't go up to Tybee Island again. For a while, he said, but his voice was already rehearsed, too firm for improvisation. Sloan thinks we need privacy, Mom. The cabin it's our refuge. I laughed humorlessly. Refuge from whom, Caleb? From your family? He looked away and adjusted his ring like turning a lock. In the window, the magnolias trembled in the south wind. Inside, it was my faith that trembled. 3 months later, the phone rang at 2:14 a.m. The early morning had the metallic smell of news no one wants to hear. It was an accident on the stairs, said a voice that didn't know me, as if it could name the chaos with a 5-syllable word. I dressed in the dark, my trembling hands adjusting a light coat out of pure maternal stubbornness, as if I could still cover my boy's cold. At the hospital, the hallway felt like a long canyon where every voice echoed. Sloan cried, her mascara still smudging. He was always careless when he drank, she said, and the sentence hung in the air, like a crooked picture no one offers to straighten. At the funeral, Savannah celebrated the son as if she owed no respect to anyone's death. The church smelled of old wood and lilies. I looked at the casket and remembered Caleb as a boy. Running barefoot on the sand of Tybee, his hair plastered to his forehead, his laughter as wide as a high tide. Attorney Robert Miles, always correct, shook my hand with a solemnity that irritated and saved me at the same time. Mrs. Alvarez, Caleb left me an envelope to give you. And the keys. The keys weighed heavily in my palm like a small set of bells only I could hear. Sloan watched us from afar, too attentive for a widow with downcast eyes. I returned home with the envelope in my purse, but I couldn't open it. Grief has these strange ways. Sometimes we prefer the weight of mystery to the irreversible weight of truth. I spent the night sitting in the straw chair on the porch, listening to the train in the distance and the crickets chirping in the silence. At dawn, I put on a cotton dress, tied up my hair, and decided Tybee owed me answers. I crossed the bridge, the Atlantic shining like a blade in the sun. The blue cottage appeared, worn by salt and solitude, the wooden deck begging for footsteps, the windows like tired eyes. The key turned in the lock with a precise, ancient, intimate click. I entered. The air smelled of the sea and of absence. It was there, with the sound of the wind rushing through the cracks, that I finally broke the envelope's seal. The cottage didn't welcome me with warmth. It welcomed me with silence. The kind of silence that seems to have teeth, that bites the air and cuts the skin. The blue walls were worn but firm, like ancient guardians of the sea. The floor creaked beneath my footsteps, betraying my presence as if the house had been waiting for just that moment to wake up. On the living room table, a thin layer of dust scratched my fingers, but the marks of recent glasses told me someone was still moving around. I climbed the stairs slowly, each step groaning, as if I knew too much. The same flight of stairs that had carried my son. My heart raced, and the memory came without asking. Caleb, at 12, running clumsily up the stairs, shouting that he'd seen dolphins in the sea. My chest tightened, and for the first time, I realized how memory can also pull someone down. In the master bedroom, I found the envelope already open on the hastily made bed. Caleb's shaky handwriting stared back at me. Mom, if you're reading this, it's because I couldn't resist anymore. I read it standing up, like someone who doesn't deserve rest. His words were a confession and a cry for help. He talked about how Sloan pushed him away, how I suffocated him, how he no longer knew the truth from lies. He talked about the money disappearing from his account, the pills appearing on the nightstand, the gaps in his memory when he woke up with no memory of the night before. If anything happens to me, Protect Theo. He's all I have left. I fell to my knees, the paper crumpling between my fingers. The air felt trapped in my lungs, and I needed to hear the ocean outside to believe the world hadn't stopped. But something had. Something inside me. I got up and started opening cabinets, drawers, boxes. I found half-packed suitcases, hastily torn papers, and the laptop, still warm as if it had just been used. On my desktop, a folder called Personal Important blinked at me like a beacon. I clicked it, and the abyss opened. There were receipts of transfers to accounts in Sloane's sister's name, emails exchanged with phrases like, "He doesn't notice anything," and "It'll be easy soon." A screenshot of a conversation with someone saved as K. Trainer. Sweaty messages of desire, dates arranged in Savannah hotels, and a video. With trembling hands, I pressed play. Caleb, my boy, stared at the camera with reddened eyes and a weary voice. "If you're watching this, Sloane, I can't take it anymore. I know the lies, I know the money, I know the coach. I just don't know what you put in my cup. But I feel it. I wake up heavy. I'm scared. If I fall, it wasn't carelessness. And if my mom finds this, take care of Theo, Mom. He needs you more than ever." The screen went dark, and the sea roared in the distance like an ancient witness. It was then that I understood. My grief had no room for naivete. What had killed Caleb hadn't been a ladder. I threw open all the curtains in the cottage as if opening wounds wide so they could heal. The afternoon light poured in mercilessly, revealing neglected corners, stains from glasses on the sideboard, and Theo's toys abandoned in a basket, colorful plastic cars, a rubber dinosaur with a bitten tail. My heart broke in two. He had played there, amidst this invisible poison. I sat down beside the laptop, the screen still lit, and continued to scroll. The emails cut me more than any knife. Sloane writing to her sister things like, "Caleb won't last. He's fragile. I'll get everything. House, insurance, pension." Each word was a nail hammered into the coffin of naivete. In another file, bank statements showed drip-drip transfers, exact amounts, almost meticulous, as if someone were bleeding someone dry without them noticing. I also found the prescription in Sloane's name. High-dose insomnia pills. The stamp of a Savannah doctor I knew by name. I remembered Caleb's dark circles, his slurred speech during recent phone calls. I remembered how, at Easter, he'd barely held Theo, as if his body wasn't responding. And now I knew. It wasn't fatigue, it was poison masquerading as care. But nothing cut me as much as listening to the video again. I replayed it, not out of cruelty, but because I needed to tattoo those words on my memory. Caleb, vulnerable, looking at me through the camera as if pleading with the future. "Take care of Theo, Mom." The sound of his cracked voice echoed through the room, mixing with the constant roar of the sea that came in through the cracks. I went down to the kitchen, where a window overlooked the deck and the crashing waves, eternal and indifferent. I rested my hands on the cold counter and saw myself reflected in the glass. Disheveled gray hair, red eyes, a trembling mouth. I, Nora Alvarez, widow, grieving mother, now guardian of a truth that could destroy or strengthen me. "You will not take my grandson, Sloane," I whispered to the glass as if it were a blood oath. The sea roared in response, and in that instant I knew. My fight began there, between the worn planks of that cottage. Late that afternoon, I rummaged through more drawers and found an old photo. Me, a teenage Caleb, and baby Theo in his father's arms. The frame was face down, as if someone had deliberately hidden it. I brushed the dust off with the hem of my dress and promised, looking into those childish eyes, "You won't get lost in the lie. Not you, Caleb, not you, Theo." The sun sank below the horizon, painting the sky blood red. Night was approaching, and with it the weight of a decision. Report Sloane to the authorities, risking the case being hushed up again, or act independently, with the cunning life had taught me. The next day, I knocked on the door of Savannah's house, where Sloane still lived. She opened it, dressed impeccably in mourning. A tight black dress, subtle makeup, and expensive perfume that seemed to mask something rotten. Her eyes, however, weren't crying. They shone with calculation. "Nora," he said with a theatrical sigh, "I didn't expect to see you so soon." I took a deep breath. The air smelled of artificial flowers, like a long wake. "I need to talk about Caleb," I replied firmly, looking at her like someone facing a judge. She stepped back to let me in, but the gesture was forced. Theo's toys were scattered around the room, but the boy was nowhere to be seen. My heart raced. "Where is he?" I asked, more harshly than I'd planned. "With the nanny," he answered too quickly, pouring himself water as if trying to keep his hands from shaking. "Nora, I know you're suffering. But let's not reopen wounds. What happened was an accident." I placed a folder I'd brought from the cabin on the table. She froze. The glass clinked on its saucer. "You should be more careful where you leave evidence," I said, controlling my anger. "Printouts, statements, prescriptions, even Caleb's video. He didn't fall down those stairs." Her mask slipped for a second. Her lips curved into a short, venomous smile. "You're nothing," she murmured, barely audible. "And even if you were, who would believe it? He was drinking. He was unstable. He was being poisoned," I said. "I know, and now everyone will know." She put down her glass and leaned across the table, her face inches from mine. Her tone changed, cold, cutting. "You're old. You know how the courts work. Money buys silence, buys time. And if you try to take Theo from me, I can disappear with him in a night." My blood ran cold, but I didn't look away. "Try it. I swear to God, Sloane, if you touch it, no sea or border will hide you from me." The silence between us weighed like lead. She leaned back, her smile returning, but now with venom exposed. "Perhaps we can resolve it another way," she said, crossing her legs with calculated elegance. "The cottage. Leave it to me. Keep your memories, Nora. I'll pay." My heart burned. The house I'd helped buy, the home Caleb had dreamed of for Theo, reduced to a bargaining chip. I took a deep breath and, instead of giving in, opened my purse and let her see a copy of a flash drive. "I've thought about it, Sloane. And I've already assured her that I'm not the only one holding this evidence." The color drained from her face for a moment. And in that instant, I knew. The battle was on. That night, I returned to Tybee's cabin, unable to sleep. The wind rattled the windows as if the house itself were breathing with me, on alert. Sloane had bared her teeth. She'd threatened to take Theo as if speaking of a disposable object. I knew. From now on, there was no turning back. I lit a candle on the kitchen table and spread the papers out before me. Every statement, every printout, every receipt. The flash drive was safely tucked inside a cookie tin I'd buried in the backyard under the damp sand. If she tried to silence me, someone would find it. Caleb had trusted me with his son's life, and I couldn't waver. I spent hours remembering Theo's gaze. Light brown, curious, too innocent to carry a mother like Sloane. I remembered the times he'd run into my arms in Savannah's backyard, his little hands covered in dirt, saying, "Nana, look." I wouldn't allow his childhood to be hijacked by lies and pills hidden in nightcaps. In the morning, I went to the police station. Detective Martinez greeted me with his usual bureaucratic patience. "Ms. Alvarez, we've already reviewed the case. The report is clear. Accidental fall." I placed the documents in front of him, unblinking. "Are you seeing the same thing I am? Money disappearing, messages of betrayal, prescriptions for sedatives, and the video? My son recorded his own fear." He sighed, massaging his forehead. "I understand your pain. But legally, that's not enough. We'd need forensic evidence, witnesses. The prosecutor's office won't reopen the case." I left there with my soul on fire. Formal justice was a concrete wall. All I had to do was be the living wall between Theo and the abyss. I sought out Robert Miles, the lawyer. He greeted me in his old office, which smelled of leather and law books. "Nora, the will is solid. Caleb left you the house. As for Theo's custody, it will be a battle, but with the evidence of adultery and the transfers, we have a strong case." I embraced that hope like someone clutching a plank at sea. Perhaps the law wouldn't convict Sloane of murder, but it might show her to be an unworthy mother. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to save my grandson. Back on Tybee, Theo was waiting for me. He ran across the deck with the dinosaur in his hand, laughing loudly as the breeze ruffled his hair. The sea behind him felt like an oath, constant, vast, protective. I knelt and hugged him tightly. Here, my love. No one will hurt you. This house is your fortress. In that moment, I realized I wasn't just fighting Sloane. I was fighting oblivion, the lie that tried to bury Caleb's memory. From that moment on, my entire life would be my grandson's trench. The Chatham County Courthouse had its usual solemn air, high ceilings, American flags fluttering motionlessly, and a chill that came not only from the air conditioning, but from the distance between justice and truth. I sat on the wooden bench, my trembling hands holding a photo of Caleb with Theo on my lap. Sloane walked in as if on parade. Navy blue dress, impeccable hair, a pearl necklace that didn't belong to her soul. Her lawyers spoke quietly around her, like vultures sniffing for flesh. When the judge called the case, my heart raced. Robert Miles stood with the studied calm of someone who knows the weight of words. Your Honor, we are faced with a mother who cheated, embezzled resources, and failed to prove herself capable of protecting her child. He displayed some of the documents. Screenshots projected on the screen showed cutting sentences. It doesn't last. It will be easy soon. Sloane feigned indignation. This evidence was obtained illegally. It means nothing. Caleb was unstable, everyone knows that. I stood up before the judge could stop me. Unstable? My voice echoed through the room, choked. My son was a good man, a present father. He was afraid, and rightly so. He asked me to protect him. I showed him the photo in my hands. That smile here won't be buried in lies. The silence was heavy. The judge cleared his throat, ordering me to sit down, but I saw something shift in his eyes. Compassion, perhaps. The following days were a battle of paperwork, hearings, and witnesses. Sloane painted herself as a victim, a young widow and a devoted mother. But every time the mask slipped, when she became irritated by simple questions, when she couldn't justify suspicious deposits, I saw her lawyers shift uncomfortably. Still, it wasn't easy. Martinez had refused to reopen the criminal case, and the specter of an accident loomed large. There were nights I'd huddle in the cabin, crying silently so as not to scare Theo, asking God if I was strong enough. But then, in the morning, Theo would run to the sea with his red bucket, trying to fill it with foam as if it were treasure. Nana, look, it's my castle. And I remembered the promise recorded in the video. Take care of Theo, Mom. Every laugh of his was fuel. Every wave crashing against the deck was an answer. I wouldn't give up, not even if I had to spend years in court, not even if I had to face the shadows alone. Theo wouldn't grow up under Sloane's calculating eyes. Deep down, I knew that this war wouldn't end with the judge's gavel. It would end with the constancy of my presence, with the love that would transform that beach house into a home, with the silence of the night when I would read Caleb's letter and repeat, I have not failed you, son. The blue cottage on Tybee, which once seemed like a tomb of secrets, began to transform before my eyes. Each morning, Theo ran across the deck with still clumsy steps, and I watched the sun gild his hair as if sealing a pact of new life. I hung light curtains on the windows and washed the walls until the smell of the sea replaced the mustiness of absence. It was as if the house breathed again. Theo had his 3-year-old quirks, the dinosaur always by his side, the need to hear the same story 3 times before bed. I gave in, repeated myself, invented different voices. His laughter filled the corners that had previously held a heavy silence. Even the staircase, which for months had carried my terror, had now become the stage for our games of pirates climbing aboard the ship. I still felt chills looking at those steps, but each of Theo's laughs was like an antidote, dissolving the shadow. I began small rituals. In the morning, black coffee for me and warm milk for him on the balcony, overlooking the sea. At dusk, we'd walk along the sand, leaving footprints side by side, which the tide would soon erase, reminding me that life goes on, but also teaching me that the love I left in Theo wouldn't be swept away. At night, before bed, I'd light a candle in the corner of the living room and place Caleb's photo nearby. Theo would sometimes touch the image and say, "Daddy smiling." I'd reply, "He'll always smile for you, my love." There was still bureaucracy, hearings, paperwork, social reports. But in those simple moments, I realized that true custody had already been decided, not by a judge, but by the life I was planting there. Theo trusted me with a naturalness that hurt and healed at the same time. One afternoon, I found Caleb's favorite wooden chair, forgotten in the attic. I brought it out onto the deck. I sat there, the sea in front of me, Theo playing in the sand, and felt my son beside me. I touched the worn wood and whispered, "I'm keeping my word, Caleb. He's safe. He'll grow up hearing the truth." The cabin was no longer a scene of betrayal. It had become our refuge, a place where every wave seemed to repeat the same phrase, "Life goes on, but memory does not die." It was night on Tybee. The wind blew against the blinds, bringing the salty scent of the Atlantic, and the moon streaked silver across the wooden deck. Theo was already asleep. The dinosaur clutched to his chest, his face serene as if he hadn't yet grasped the weight of the world's betrayals. I sat in Caleb's chair, my laptop on my lap, the yellowed letter in my hands. I read each line slowly, as if it were a prayer. "Mom, if anything happens to me, protect Theo. He's all I have left." The words trembled beneath my fingers, but within me there was no longer the dizziness of despair. There was a calm strength, like the tide that recedes only to surge back higher. I opened the video again. The grainy image showed my son in his final truth. Red eyes, a broken voice, but the courage to name his fear. "I just don't know what you put in my cup. Take care of Theo, Mom." As the screen faded to black, I felt tears fall, but they were different from the first. They weren't tears of helplessness. They were tears of promise fulfilled. I got up and went to Theo's room. I knelt beside the bed and stroked his fine hair. He was breathing deeply, innocently. I whispered, "You will grow up without lies, my love. You will know who your father really was. And this house, this sea, this truth, they will always be yours." I returned to the deck and left the letter on the table, a lit candle beside it. The sea roared steadily, an eternal witness. I took a deep breath and realized formal justice might never come, but I had won the battle that mattered. Theo was protected. Caleb would not be silenced. I closed my eyes and let the breeze wash over me. The cottage, now alive, seemed to whisper to me, inheritance is not just walls and wood. It is the truth kept. It is the love that endures. And in that moment, with the moon high over the Atlantic, I swore to myself, as long as I breathed, Theo would never be a prisoner of shadows. He would inherit the light. The days on Tybee took on a rhythm of their own, as if time followed a different rhythm at the cottage. In the mornings, Theo and I would go to the seashore to collect shells. He would run with short strides, laughing as the waves lapped his ankles, and hand me each little find as if it were a diamond. I kept the shells in a glass jar in the kitchen, and each night he would count them, getting the numbers wrong but getting them right, with joy. At first, I still expected to hear Sloane's footsteps on the sand, or see her shadow crossing the porch. Her threat echoed through me like distant thunder. But as the weeks passed, I realized her presence had become nothing more than a ghost, unable to penetrate the wall of love we'd erected there. There were still court battles, drawn-out hearings, endless paperwork. I'd return exhausted, but when I arrived at Tybee and heard Theo shout, "Nana!" from the deck, all the weight melted away. He'd hug me tightly, and I could feel in his small arms the victory that was already being written, day after day. I began teaching him little things, to plant beans in a pot, to listen to the sound of the ocean as music, to pray before bed, not with memorized words, but with simple gratitude. "Thank you, Heavenly Father, for today." Theo would close his eyes, and I knew that there was growing not just a child, but Caleb's purest legacy. Sometimes, at dusk, I would sit in the wooden chair with my laptop closed. I no longer needed to watch the video to remember. Caleb's voice already lived within me, mingling with the sound of the waves. And I would silently say, "He's okay, son. He's safe. His truth didn't die with me." The blue cottage, worn by salt, now shone with new life. It wasn't just my fortress. It was the altar of memory and the future. On the last night of summer, I sat on the deck with Theo asleep in my lap. The sky was dotted with stars, and the sea whispered a song that seemed uniquely ours. I looked at the house, lit up from within, every room now pulsating with life, no longer with secrets. The cottage that had once been the scene of betrayal had become the heart of our new story. I picked up Caleb's letter one last time, already crumpled from so much reading. I ran my fingers over it as if touching his hand. The weight it carried was no longer of pain, but of mission accomplished. "I took care of him, Caleb," I murmured, "and I will until my dying day." The memories still hurt. Caleb's laughter on the stairs, his weary expression over the past few months, the lost look I hadn't quite deciphered in time. But now that pain was mingled with the certainty that his voice hadn't been in vain. He'd left me a task, and with every breath Theo took, I knew I was fulfilling it. In the distance, I saw the tide rising, erasing the footprints we'd left in the sand earlier. It was then that I understood. Life always erases traces, but it doesn't erase the essence of love. And Caleb's love, even after death, guided me. I hugged Theo tighter, feeling his warmth against my chest. I whispered in the boy's ear, even though I knew he was asleep, "You will grow up free, surrounded by truth. You will know who your father was, and you will inherit not just a home, but a story of courage." And when the wind brought the salty scent of the Atlantic, I closed my eyes and smiled. The future wouldn't be easy, but it would be ours. Because some houses aren't just walls, they're promises. And this one, on Tybee, promised to never let the truth die. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel to follow more stories like this. Leave a like to support our work and share in the comments which city you're watching from. I want to feel how far this voice of truth and courage can reach.